to this week's book club for Star Wars Aftermath Life Debt. If you are unfamiliar with this series, this is where we kind of go through this trilogy by Chuck Wendig, a couple of chapters at a time. If you want, you can click here and it'll take you back to Aftermath, the first book, which we had already gone through this playlist. Or if you've seen it or just want to catch up with Life Debt, we're only, I think this is only the third video of this book, so you can click here and that will take you back to the beginning of this book. But with that, let's get into today's reading. So today's reading was chapters 4 and 5. It was a lot lighter reading than last week, so we're gonna have a little bit easier time kind of dissecting all of this, I think. Basically, chapter 4 is a nice, giant family get together. You kind of get the idea of how this Aftermath crew, I suppose we could call them the Halo crew, though I'm just kind of used to calling them the Aftermath crew at this point. We kind of see how they interact. So this is the fallout from what we discussed 2 weeks ago, which was the kind of opening, kind of Bond, first scene of a Bond movie kind of a thing, where we see them out on the mission that they do before we get into this book, where they kind of do the unusual kind of missions. Now, right here at the beginning of this chapter, they are still being pursued by the bad guys. They're being pursued by a TIE fighter that eventually falls away and stops chasing them. And Nora is thinking about how unusual this was, and usually the Empire would throw as many TIE fighters as they can to bring somebody down. And she's talking to Timon about this, and they kind of have this thought of, man, what if we're winning? What if this is what it looks like when the Empire doesn't have infinite resources anymore? Which is kind of an interesting moment. We don't really ever get told for sure that that's what's happening, but it is kind of this moment where they kind of have this hope of, wow, maybe the rebellion, maybe the New Republic is actually kind of gaining ground. After this, we get into the fallout of what was in that first chapter, which is Jazz seemingly betraying them. We find out from Jazz that this was actually her plan all along. See, there's now a bounty on all of their heads. All of them are known throughout space as being these people that you don't want to get mixed up in. And Jazz was like, I was never going to be able to sneak in and infiltrate this crime palace because I have a bounty on my own head. So she set this thing up where she was going to collect a bounty on all of her friends, but she couldn't tell her friends because she says they're the good guys, they're the good people, they can't lie and manipulate, and she just couldn't trust them to be able to, hold a steady face with what they're doing, which for Nora and John makes sense. It's interesting that she doesn't do it with Singer, who's somebody she does seem to trust, and somebody who should have the ability to kind of fake something, the ability to lie, but the one person she does tell is Timon. Much to Nora's great displeasure, Timon is being pulled in by Jazz. So what we have here is the kid is the only one who isn't so earnest that, he can keep a straight face when he knows what's up. So, I mean, it's good that Jazz did tell somebody else, and it does kind of prove that Jazz really was just doing it for the looks, that she's not really out to betray everyone. It does kind of show that she still has this edge of, if I can get paid twice, why not get paid twice? And we did see her working with Timon on this type of thing in the first book, so it kind of makes sense that this is going to continue. But later on in the chapter, and I'll just go ahead and skip ahead to it, Timon and Nora have this really nice heart-to-heart talk, where Nora is, she kind of has this fourth wall moment, if you will, where she's like, oh gosh, I'm going to give you one of those mom talks. My mom used to give me these talks, and I never listened to them, and you're going to not listen to me, but I'm going to give you this talk anyway. It was this really kind of cute moment, and it's one of the moments where Nora as a mom frustrates me as a character. Part of that, though, I don't think is the writing. I think it's because she's written such like a mom that it puts me in the position of talking to my mom, and so I kind of feel a lot of Timon's frustrations, and I don't mean that as a slam on my mother at all. It's just, it's written so well where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm still at the position in my life. Even though I'm far older than Timon, not having a kid myself or anything, I'm still more in the kind of younger person's mentality in that relationship. But this was a sweeter moment where it's like, okay, I really appreciate Nora being aware of how useless this conversation could likely be. Though I think oftentimes that parents are aware of that. When parents are aware of that, are the times where kids probably listen the most, ironically enough. But she tells Timon, that he doesn't have to be a bounty hunter, that he doesn't have to be what anyone tells him to be, that he can kind of go and be his own person. Now, of course, she's doing this in large part because she's afraid for him, she doesn't want him to get into danger. She's doing this because what mother wants to see her child become a bounty hunter. But I think she genuinely means it to that she wants to see Timon not feel like he has to be his father or be her, and that Timon can be Timon, and that's okay, whatever Timon is. And just because he's enamored with the lifestyle that Jazz has, and just because he's had to live this life on his own for so long, he doesn't have to keep doing it, that he has these opportunities now. And I think it's really important for Tim as the story goes. And I liked seeing, Nora is getting better at mothering, considering in the last book, one of the first things she did to Timon was drug him and kidnap him against his will. I don't know if it counts as kidnapping when it's your own kid, but drugging him was definitely bad. To go from that to being able to have this conversation. And I don't know that it's a fundamental change in Nora's character as much as I think she was just really rusty at being a mom, and she's getting better at it again and kind of finding herself back to that again. And so this was a thing where in the first book, some of my least favorite parts are the relationship between Nora and Timon. But that's something where in this book, they're already improving on it. I think it's partly because the writing improves in Life Debt and improves further in Empire's End, in my opinion. I don't say that Aftermath is poorly written, just that the subsequent books are written better, in my opinion. But speaking of sweet moments, the other thing, that the other dynamic in this crew is Jom is not as happy about how no one's happy about how this went down, but Jom is especially not happy. And while Jazz is trying to do first aid on Sindri because his arm's all swollen up, I really like at one point she insults him by calling him Mon Calamari Arm or something like that. I thought that was really funny. Jazz and Jom are arguing, and they go from arguing to arguing, and that was, I remember that surprised me the first time I read it, because it feels so out of the blue. It's definitely falling down the I hate you so much I love you trope, but I think it works. I think it adds kind of a creative dynamic to the show. I mean, Jazz kind of came on to Sindri in the last book, so I think Jazz has been looking for someone anyway, and it just kind of worked out. But the part of it that I really enjoy is after the fact, Jom comes out and Sindri gives him the older brother talk. He's like, and what I love about this is he's so playing on Jom's insecurities. So he's like right up in Jom's face, like messing with his hair and like straightening it out, which is anytime somebody you don't know particularly well, anytime somebody you don't trust at all is like touching you, it's uncomfortable. But then for Sindri to be doing this, I mean, Sindri is clearly using his sexuality as a way to try to cause discomfort in Jom. I just choose, like, I just kind of read it that way because you would think that Jom stereotypically would be bothered by that. And then he goes in and threatens Jom, with the however many points of pain, and I actually discovered 3 more, and it was a really great conversation. But then on the end of that conversation, it kind of flips where I think Jom's probably a little bit nervous, but he's not, if anything, he respects Sindri a lot after this conversation. And actually, as much as I think he's bothered that Sindri's in his personal space, is not actually bothered by Sindri at all, and expresses congratulations when we find out that apparently Sindri's taken. So in between books, Sindri has found a boyfriend, which we will meet later in the book. So I kind of liked the subtext that was going on in there, and it was one of those scenes where it was a great character moment for Sindri, just to be the older brother and like threaten Jom, but then to also kind of show this secondary level of character interactions and what the characters are like. I just think it was, for as like straight out of a Hallmark movie kind of a scene as it was, it did its purpose particularly well, and I think it conveyed a lot of information in one scene. Jom also brings up the idea that, why does Sindri care so much about Jazz? Because they're not, he uses the word compatible, which is awkward as all get out, but whatever. But because they're not compatible, why does Sindri care? And you also get the idea that Sindri's starting to make a friend, and I thought that was really good as well. The other thing with Sindri that I really liked is at one point he actually calls Nora mom, and she's like, don't call me that. And he's like, you're no fun. And Nora's like, obviously I'm not. And I don't know. This chapter had a series of really good moments that somehow in some way weaved this web where you could see exactly how each character felt about the other, and it's really important to establish that quick right now moving forward. Because even though a lot of these characters were together in the first book, they did it at a place of not trusting each other, not knowing each other, having all this other conflict going on, and it was nice to see them, get to know them, not just as their own characters, but as a group. The other thing with Timon that we see is that he's taking some flight lessons from Wedge Antilles, who is still involved with this book. Of course, we kind of know that that's where Timon's going, because we know he's Snap Wexley in The Force Awakens. So even as we see Nora saying, Timon, you can be whoever you want to be, we do kind of know already who Timon's going to become. Which I don't think is a weakness. I think it's good to kind of see how he gets from where we see him now to where he's going later on in the saga. The kind of plot point in this, outside of the character points, is when they get back, it turns out the bounty they went to collect is dead. Apparently murdered. Jazz thinks that it was a slow burn murder, that his spice, because in the chapter prior, he was high as anything. Jazz thinks that they spiked his spice, and that somebody was trying to kill him, only for him to get kidnapped and then die in captivity by accident, basically. So that's gonna be kind of this mystery thing going forward, is just what happened there, and it does help this to be a little bit more relevant. Well, you'll see, basically, as we go. I say that, one, not spoil, two, I don't really remember myself. I remember that it is important, and I don't remember why. So then we get to chapter 5, and the big part of chapter 5 is Nora meets Leia. She meets Leia Organa, Princess Leia, General Organa, however you want to refer to her. Now, of course, Leia wants to be called Leia, which I think is really fun. Nora is uncomfortable with this, and Leia's like, would it help if I ordered you to call me Leia? And Nora's like, I think it would, and then Leia does this grandiose thing. I thought it was a cute moment. Leia is, oddly enough, one of the hardest characters to write, I think, in Star Wars. She's certainly one of the characters that it was most often written poorly in Legends. In Legends canon, she had like a different personality every book, it felt like sometimes. She's been done much better in new canon. And here, this is the chapter where it's revealed that Han and Leia were married on Endor. I couldn't remember if we learned it in this book or in another source, but it is in this book. And I like the idea that it wasn't private, it wasn't a secret, but it wasn't necessarily public. So that, you know, people know that they're married, but they don't, like, they didn't post it on Spacebook, basically. It's just something that if you know them, you know that that's what happened. One kind of interesting note here is when Nora meets Leia, you know, she's talking about how vibrant and glowing Leia is in the light. It's just an interesting detail. But that's what I had to say for this week. I really enjoyed the chapters we got to read. I'm happy to dive back in. Tell me what you think about the story so far in the comments. I'd love to hear from you guys. And as an aside, I don't know if you may have seen on some of our other videos, but we've launched a Discord server. If you're not familiar with Discord, it's a free chat application that you can either download to your phone, computer, or visit online through a browser. And we have a spot there specifically to discuss these books as we go. Now, I'm still more than happy to talk to you in the comments. I'm not going to not talk to you in the comments now. But if you would like to join there, we can kind of have a conversation in real time and not just when I happen to check YouTube. And it would be a lot of fun. But if you don't, there's no pressure. I'm just letting you guys know that there is a specific section there to talk about this if you want. For next week, let's go ahead and read chapters 6, the Interlude, and chapters 7. So we'll start trying to do 3 of these at a time again, now that we're kind of through the beginning. So chapter 6, Interlude, and 7. I'm excited to get into that. If you are not already, please follow us on Twitter at Port Haven Forums and visit port-haven.com for more. And I will talk to you guys next week.